So I want to talk to you about the 5 things that we take into consideration when growing tomato plants and how we get them to their optimal state. The 5 elements I'm talking about are seed choice, sun exposure, soil, water and air. Let's dive right into the first one, seed choice. Alright nerds, let's talk about seed. What's the difference between different seed and why it's important what you choose? So I'm standing next to our seed table over here, and as you can tell, a lot of stuff is coming up. This is for the autumn garden, so no tomatoes in here obviously. But the reason I'm standing here is because I wanted to quickly talk to you guys about the different types of seeds that exist and why you should choose carefully. So let's first distinguish between the 3 different types of seed that you can buy. There's heirloom seeds, there's hybrid seed, and there is GMO seed. Heirloom seeds are seeds that are produced by open pollination and are selected year after year by growers who select on certain traits such as size, taste, color, resistance to drought, resistance to diseases, and all of that. By repeating this process generation after generation, you come to a seed that is very true to type, meaning that all the offspring looks almost identical to the parent plant, as the gene pool has been now narrowed down to these specific characteristics. Then we have our hybrids. Now this is a little bit more complicated. Hybrid seed is the result of crossbreeding 2 different types of varieties of tomatoes, and that happens by human intervention, by transferring the pollen from one variety onto the stigma of another. The reason that this is special is because tomatoes are actually self-pollinating plants, meaning that they carry both male and female reproductive organs within the same flower. So in nature it's highly unlikely that 2 different varieties of tomatoes would actually cross-pollinate, as the chance of the flower pollinating itself is much higher than the cross-pollination happening. The result of this is that you will set fruit on that plant, which in turn will produce seed. The reason that home growers might be less attracted to hybrids is because you will not be able to save your own seed. Well, of course you will be able to, but you were not ensured that the result of that seed will actually be consistent with the parent plant. So therefore you are going to start getting reorganization of the gene pool over generations, meaning that you don't really know what you're going to get. Then we have the 3rd category, which is GMO seed. GMO seed is basically genetically modified seed. This is the product of genetic engineering and is done in laboratory. This is a controversial topic, as many people, especially in organic farming and regenerative farming, are completely opposed to using genetically modified material, as it can pose long-term health risks and also is quite controversial to what it does to biodiversity and the mixing of gene pools in nature. Alright, well, that maybe makes it clear that we use heirloom or hybrids, and specifically mostly heirloom, as we like to save our own seed. Great, so now we have clear what the different categories of seeds are. Let's move on to the second important step, which is actually to choose between the different growing styles. We have determinate and undeterminate tomatoes, and the difference between the 2 is the way that they grow. Undeterminate tomatoes keep growing and are usually quite viney and bushy. They are real spreaders and need a lot of support, and the fruit will ripen during the entire season, as it will keep on setting and ripening as you go. Determinate tomatoes, however, are quite small and bushy and will set a certain amount of fruit, which will ripen in a short window of time. The plant takes a lot less space as well, so if you're growing in a confined area, like on a balcony for instance, determinate tomatoes can be the best option for you. Alright, so choosing your seed. We've now concurred basically you should go for heirloom and throw in an odd hybrid here and there maybe. Then you want to talk about your supplier and your expiration date, and of course about the specifics on your seed package. So first of all, expiration date, very important. Fresh seed has the highest germination rate. The older the seed, usually the lower the germination rate. A lot of that seed has been kept in less than optimal conditions, meaning that the germination rate goes down. You can always check your germination rate. If you're unsure, you just put 10 little seeds in a little bag, put it on a hot place with a bit of water, a damp cloth, and see how many of your 10 seeds germinate. If that's 5, that's bad. If it's anywhere above 8, that's good. Your seed package will say a lot of things. It will say the name, obviously, the variety that you're going to be growing. It will advise you when to seed it, when to plant it, when to transplant it. It will give you an idea of the height of the plant. It will give you an idea of the maturation days, and all that information is on there. So definitely do have a look. Next topic up, sun exposure. Shade those puppies, especially down here in the south. In the north of Europe, you're going to be fine with having them in full sun, but down here in the southern part of the northern hemisphere, we've got way too much sun, and heat stress will make your plants suffer. So what we tend to do is we do grow them in a tunnel, but then we put a shade cloth on to prevent excess heat and too much sun exposure. Another thing to consider in terms of sun exposure is where you place your biggest variety. The variety that grows the biggest tomatoes should have the most sun exposure. So if in your bed you need to choose between the south side and the north side, always put your bigger tomatoes, your bigger fruit that is, on the south facing side. Like most vegetables, tomato plants love a sandy loamy soil that is fertile and well drained with a pH between 5.8 and 7. Now that is very specific and not everybody will have those conditions in their garden. But I've got great news for those of you who don't have those exact conditions. If you treat your soil well and you introduce a bit of compost year after year, you spray some compost tea here and there, you are also capable of growing an amazing crop. My biggest advice to anybody is, in terms of soil health, just make sure that when you're planting your tomatoes, you have put down a bit of compost beforehand and you keep putting compost on year after year. Remember, it is the microbiome of your soil that will make healthy plants, and this is of key importance. I cannot stress this part enough. If you want to know more on that, you could check out this video that we made on the Food Soil Web. It's about regenerative agriculture and how it works in all kinds of ways, so if that's new to you, go over there. We've had seed, we've had sun, we've had soil, and now we're moving on to water and air. What I'm doing to these beans here is an absolute no-no when it comes to tomatoes. Watering overhead is a terrible plan, as it will actually attract a lot of fungal and bacterial diseases. So therefore we have a drip lay down, and that is really the optimal way to water. If you don't have a drip system though, don't despair. You can always with a hose just water it at the feet of the plant. Besides the fact that these ladies don't like to get a shower overhead, you also need to take into consideration the time in which you're going to be watering. The best time to water a tomato is in the evening time, as they have the entire night to now suck up this water and bring it back into their system, as opposed to during the day when they're competing with the sun and actually a lot of that water will evaporate. So as you can tell, these ladies are notoriously bushy, and all this leaf can sometimes prevent airflow from coming through. This is a very important tip. Make sure that at the bottom of your plant enough airflow can get through to prevent any bacterial and fungal disease from setting. Just like these yard-long beans, tomatoes need to be trellised. Indeterminate viney tomatoes need a lot of support. They're like little babies and they won't make it on their own. Otherwise they'll be crawling all over the floor, and yes, they will survive, but disease pressure will be high because you have very little airflow, and also harvesting becomes a mess. So what we do is we bring them on up, and we do that by this system called Dutch line training. This actually enables us to work the plant within our might, within our realm of movement. And we do that by laying the plants flat as they grow. We have a 1 liter system, meaning that there's one main stem of which we annihilate all the suckers. We'll get into that in a second. And by doing so, we are basically letting the plant grow the entire season. And by laying it flat, we can get up to plants that are 10-15 meters long. But we will never be working up here, we are always working down here. So the reason we want to stress that we choose the 1 liter system instead of letting our plants grow very bushy is that quantity-wise you might get less tomatoes, but quality-wise you're doing better. The energy will focus on the plant setting on that 1 liter, meaning that you will get nicer, bigger fruit. During the life cycle of these plants, and they go out in early May, end of April, early May, we usually have them alive until the end of September, even beginning of October if the weather permits. And that means that there is a long time on the farm where you have tomatoes. And when you're planning your time, it's important to remember that, because they do need some attention, especially if you are keeping them down to 1 liter and you don't want a bushy mess. And the way that you keep things organized and tidy is by removing suckers from the plant. So what are suckers and how do you prune them? A lot of people are slightly afraid of pruning the tomato wrong, but once you get it, it really isn't all that hard. So the first thing you want to do is you want to look out for, of course, the main leader, the main stem. The sun leaves are the leaves that will help this photosynthesis factory to produce its energy, and they are very important. So don't take those off, but in the armpit of those sun leaves, between the leaf and the main stem, you will see new growth starting to appear. This little growth has leaves as well, and if it's tiny you can just pinch it out. We usually don't grow a lot of determined tomatoes, but if you do, it's very important to realize that cutting or pruning for these plants is really ill-advised. There is a certain amount of fruit that this plant will set, and the more you trim it back, the less fruit you will end up with. And that's it for today's episode, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new. And if you haven't subscribed yet, but you do find value in our channel, I would very much appreciate it if you would hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. We're trying to grow the channel and all help is welcome. We hope to see you on the next one. The Farming Chefs, peace out.